The third day they worked late. They were trying to clear a small stand of dead spruce before the next snowfall, which Aslak said was coming the next morning, and which would be heavy, maybe a meter, maybe more. They did not stop for lunch. They worked through the short blue afternoon and into the dusk, and they only stopped when the light failed enough that swinging an axe became a way to take off your own foot. It was on the way back to the cabin that Jonas first felt it. He was last in the line that evening. Aslak was first with the headlamp. Henrik was in the middle. Jonas, who was the youngest and the fittest, was bringing up the rear with the sledge. The path back to the cabin wound between the great trunks. The headlamp light reached maybe 15 meters in front of Aslak, which meant it reached not at all to Jonas. Jonas was walking by the dim shape of Henrik's back ahead of him, by feel and by the memory of the path. And then, somewhere out in the trees to his left, perhaps 30 meters into the dark, he heard a footstep in the snow. It was a single footstep, soft, the crisp little sound of a boot or a foot pressing through the icy crust into the powder beneath. He stopped. He listened. There was no second step. Jonas told his brother later that in that moment he did not feel afraid. What he felt was something much stranger. He felt the way a man feels when he walks into a room and someone is already standing in the dark, perfectly still, watching him, and has been watching him for some time. He did not say anything. He pulled the sledge harder. He caught up to Henrik. They reached the cabin. They went inside. They ate. They slept. The next morning, Aslak went around to the north side of the cabin to bring in firewood, and when he came back, he had a strange, closed look on his face. Jonas asked him what was wrong. Aslak looked at him for a long time, the way Henrik had looked at him on the second night, and then he said, in his soft northern accent, "There were tracks in the snow last night." Jonas said, "Tracks?" Aslak said, "Around the cabin. They went all the way around, twice. They start nowhere and they end nowhere. They came up out of the snow on the north side and they went back into the snow on the north side. And the print is barefoot, a woman's foot, small." Jonas felt the cold go through the back of his neck and into his shoulders. He said, "Maybe it's an animal. Maybe a deer that was hurt and dragged." Aslak said very gently, "Jonas, I am a tracker. It is a barefoot woman." He said nothing else. He went inside. That morning was the morning of the fourth day. The snowstorm came in around noon, and they did not work, and they sat in the cabin and they listened to the wind, and Henrik did not speak, and Aslak did not speak. And Jonas, who had been raised in a town where it was rude to be silent for too long, finally said, "What is it? What is out there?" Henrik looked up from the coffee he had been staring into for an hour. Henrik said, "If you have to ask, you would not believe me, so pray that you never have to know." The storm cleared by evening. The sky outside the cabin window opened up into one of those Nordic winter nights that does not look real to people from the south. The stars came out so thick and so close that the snow on the ground was lit silver. Every drift, every branch, every small rise. The temperature outside dropped to nearly -30. Inside, the stove roared and the three men ate. And Henrik went to his bunk early, and Aslak sat by the stove sharpening a small knife with slow, patient strokes. Jonas could not sleep. He felt restless the way you feel when you have been still for too many hours. He pulled on his coat and his boots, and he told Aslak he was going outside for some air. Aslak stopped sharpening. He looked up at Jonas. Aslak said, "Stay close to the door. Do not walk to the trees. Do not turn your back on them either." Jonas nodded. He almost said something to make a joke of it. He did not. He stepped outside. The cold was a physical thing. It pressed against his face and pulled the moisture from his eyes. The air was so still that the smoke from the cabin's chimney went straight up, 50, 60 meters, until it lost itself in the dark. The clearing in front of the cabin was a perfect oval of moonlit snow, perhaps 20 meters across, with the wall of pines standing all the way around it like an audience. Jonas walked a few steps from the door. He breathed in. He looked up at the stars. He thought about the girl in Trondheim. He thought about how much money he had earned already. He thought, for the first time in 3 days, of nothing in particular and felt almost peaceful. And then, from across the clearing, in the deep blue shadow at the base of the trees, something moved. He froze. For a long moment, he was certain he had imagined it. A reindeer, maybe, or a fox, or a low branch shifting under the weight of new snow. He stared into the dark. His heart, which had been quiet, began to beat very hard against the inside of his ribs. The shape moved again, and then it stepped out of the shadow and into the moonlight, and Jonas saw her. She was a young woman. She was perhaps 20 years old. She had long, dark hair that fell loose past her waist. She was wearing a pale blue dress, the kind you would see in an old photograph from a wedding in a country church, with long sleeves and a high collar. She was barefoot in the snow. She was smiling, and she was looking very directly at Jonas. She raised one hand. She waved at him, slowly, the way a friend waves to a friend across a square, as if there was nothing in the world that was strange about this, as if she had been expecting him. Jonas could not move. He thought very clearly, the way a man thinks when his body has decided to stop obeying him, of the rule: you do not look at her face, you do not call to her, and you do not, under any circumstance, follow her. But he had already looked at her face. Her face was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. It was a face that, for the rest of his life, he would never quite be able to describe to anyone, because every time he tried, the description sounded ordinary, and her face had not been ordinary. Her face had been the answer to a question he had not known he had been asking. She smiled wider. She lowered her hand. She turned. Her dark hair swung against her back. She took one step away from him, into the trees. She turned her head and looked back over her shoulder at him. She wanted him to follow. Jonas felt his right foot move. He felt his weight shift. He felt himself begin to take the first step, and from the doorway behind him, very softly, Aslak said one word in North Sami. Jonas did not understand the word, but the sound of it broke something open inside the silence of the clearing. The young woman in the blue dress flinched. Her smile did not change, but something behind her eyes did. She turned fully around to face Jonas again. She took one step toward him, and as she stepped, the wind came up suddenly across the clearing, and her dress lifted at the back, just for a second, just enough. Jonas saw what was behind her. There was nothing behind her. Nothing at all. Where her back should have been, there was only a hollow, ragged shape, like the inside of a tree that has been struck by lightning and burned out from the heart. Black, empty. He could see through the hollow, the dark of the forest behind her. She was the front of a person, only the front, and she was still smiling. Jonas felt his bladder go. He felt the warmth on the inside of his trousers freeze almost instantly in the cold. He could not move. Behind him, Aslak said, in Norwegian now, very quietly, "Walk backward, Jonas, slowly, to me. Do not turn, do not run, do not look away from her face. Walk." Jonas walked backward. 1 step, 2, 3. The young woman watched him go. She did not move from where she stood. She did not stop smiling. When Jonas's heel hit the doorframe, Aslak's hand closed on the back of his coat and pulled him inside. The door slammed. The bar dropped. Aslak threw the second bolt. In the room, Henrik was sitting up in his bunk. He was very pale. Henrik said, "Did you look at her face?" Jonas could not speak. Henrik said again, louder, "Did you look at her face?" Jonas nodded. Henrik closed his eyes. He sat there for a long moment. Then he reached under his bunk and brought out a small bottle of clear liquor, and he drank from it, and he did not offer it to either of the other men. Henrik said, "She knows your name now. She will come for it. 3 nights, maybe 4. Then she will come." Aslak was at the small north window, looking out through a gap in the shutter. He did not turn around. He said, "She is still there. She has not moved." The 3 men sat in the cabin, and the lantern flickered, and the stove crackled, and outside, in the clearing, in the silver moonlight, the young woman in the pale blue dress stood at the edge of the trees and watched the door, and she did not move, and she did not stop smiling, and somewhere far above them, the wind began to rise again through the high black branches. She would stand there until the sun came up. She would stand in the same place, in the same dress, with the same smile, for 31 hours without moving. And on the 3rd night after that, she would come to the door.
This is the end of part 1. Part 2 drops tomorrow at the same time. In part 2, you will hear what Aslak whispered into the lantern, what Henrik did with the small bone he had been hiding under his pillow, and what the voice on the other side of the door said when it called Jonas's name in his foreman's voice. You will hear who walked out of that cabin on the 7th night.